Hello, hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of Black in the Saddle. I'm Abriana, your host, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about agritourism. Agritourism is an industry that I have been increasingly interested in on a personal and professional level, and I think there is a huge opportunity for Black farms as well as Black horse farms to capitalize on some of the ways that agritourism can be a revenue stream and can allow you to utilize horses in a way that reduces the stress on the horse and the stress on you. So I'm excited to get into this episode and share with you some of the ways that I think that we can maximize on these types of opportunities and industry pathways. What if your horse farm was more than just a barn and more than just the horses? What if it was an opportunity for community, culture, and cash flow to come together all in one spot? That is the opportunity that agritourism provides. I have been researching this industry for a little over a year now to understand more about what the opportunities are and what the challenges are and what I need to do to create my own agritourism operation. I'm not sure if you've heard on the podcast before my big dream of having a horse-inspired winery, because I am a sommelier. That's agritourism. And so I've been studying that for a little bit now, and I want to share with you some of the things that I've learned and some of the opportunities that might be there for you on your horse farm. Ways that you can integrate agritourism as a revenue stream, and how Black-owned farms and Black-owned horse farms can leverage these opportunities, especially now that there is this trend or cultural shift where people are trying to return to the land and return to their roots and return to these agricultural experiences so that they can feel something and kind of escape their lives. So that's what we're talking about in this episode. Let's get into it. Last year, I was looking for something unique to celebrate my business birthday. My business, Black Unicorn Creative, was launched August 2019, and that business is what houses the brands Black in the Saddle and Cowgirl Cameron, and last year was my 5th anniversary. And so I was trying to find a way to celebrate that and treat myself to something really nice. Didn't have to be a big celebration, but something where I could learn but also enjoy myself. And so I found this organization who was doing a farm tour. It was farm tours to 5 different locations. It included lunch at one of the locations, and yeah, it was just going to be a good time. And I think 2 of the locations were wineries, so also made it a no-brainer. But when I went to this farm tour, number one, there was only one other Black woman there. And since then, we've become great friends. But number 2, I realized that agritourism as a extension of the agricultural industry offers such an opportunity for farms to bring in different experiences. And so I started to think, what would it look like for horse farms and horse people to benefit from agritourism as a concept? When I introduced myself, I said, the way that I enter agriculture is through my family and through the farming that we had done in the past, but also through horses. And, I could do a whole different episode on how horse people divorce themselves from agriculture and it's not beneficial, but that is not the point here. I said there is an underwhelming amount of horse people represented in this experience. And the more that I learned about the organization, the more that I learned that there's not that many horse farms in it. Some people, some of the farmers in the organization have horses, but they're, because the grandkid wanted one, it just happens to be on the property. There was a winery that we went to, I think in Cary of all places, that had 2 horses there. And I was like, yes, this is, I'm seeing proof that my vision is valid. Not that I needed it to be validated by anybody, but there are examples of people putting the 2 things that I'm interested in together. And I love that for me. We love a good market validation. So noticing those 2 things, lack of equestrian representation in the agritourism industry, and then lack of representation of Black farms, Black farmers, and minority farms in the Agritourism Association. So I did what I tend to do, and I got even more interested. I joined the organization by facilitating some of their monthly continuing education calls. And then, so this was August when I went to the farm tour. I started facilitating the calls by maybe October. And then by the conference in February, I was added to the board of directors for the North Carolina Agritourism Networking Association. And as far as I know, it's the only agritourism association in the state. And so now I have set my sights on how do I increase the representation of horse farms here, and how do I increase the representation of Black farmers here. And so some of these opportunities might make you think differently about how you're running your farm, if you have a farm, or if you're aspiring to own a farm, or if you are a nonprofit and you are creating offers for the public to interact with horses. You might think a little bit differently about how to do that, because let me tell you, horseback riding lessons are not the only thing you have to offer the community as a Black horse farm or a Black equestrian nonprofit. That is not the only thing that you have to offer. So now I'm asking the question, how can agritourism be a tool for financial stability, a tool for community engagement, and cultural preservation? Because just like I mentioned in a couple episodes ago, genres are a funny concept, aren't they? When we talked about Beyonce, this is a movement. I don't even know that it is just going to be a trend, because it's lasting a little bit longer than trends usually last. But it is a cultural movement of people wanting to return to their roots, where climate change is, we're starting to see the effects of that. People are starting to notice. So how can we position Black farms to benefit from this renewed interest in agriculture and the land? So let's talk about what agritourism is. It is any time the public comes and pays for an experience on a farm or ranch. Comparatively, if we're just talking about agriculture as an industry or like the market, that is more transactional, right? Coming, buying vegetables, leaving. Or at a farmer's market, buying the product, the agricultural product itself, and leaving. That's more transaction based. Agritourism is more relationship based. It is about the experience that you are providing in a space. A woman at the conference this year talked about placemaking. How do we make our setting, our location, tell the story of our farm, our family's legacy, And how do we build experiences around that that'll allow people to connect with us on a deeper level? And I love that concept. Some of the examples for agritourism for equestrian facilities is horseback riding, whether it be trail riding, like through a local area or through some trails on the farm, whether it is horseback riding lessons. There could be educational programs for kids or for adults, connections to schools, community centers, libraries, other local organizations. You could do seasonal events or festivals, and it doesn't even have to be seasonal, but for example, doing an event for Juneteenth or doing an event for Thanksgiving or New Year's or summer solstice, you know, any kind of holiday or special event. Agritourism includes things like farm stays and Airbnbs and, you know, experiencing a day in the life on a horse farm kind of thing. One of the most favorite examples that I am interested in now is equine assisted wellness and like mindfulness retreats on horse farms. I think that that's a huge way to bring people in that minimizes the work on the horse. And lastly, like farm to table events or different kind of food or drink related, food or beverage related events on the farm, highlighting locally sourced ingredients. That's a really cool way to kind of tie in agriculture, horses, and the experience that people are having. So agritourism is not just about entertaining people. It is an opportunity to educate people, to tell the story of your family or your lineage or the culture around the work that you do. And horses heal, man. It is an opportunity for healing these folk, okay? Because it is crazy out here in this world. And sometimes you know like I know, that taking a moment to just breathe with a horse can make a lot of this strife feel a little bit more manageable. So I know that there are, you know, this increase in popularity of like field parties and you know, like rodeo type events. Those are agritourism. Those are agritourism. But depending on where you are in your farm journey or your planning, you might not be able to go straight there. Or you might not want to have that kind of perception or persona on your farm. I know a lot of the trail ride groups now are not doing field parties because people are getting hurt. There is riffraff coming in that just did not respect the trail ride hosts. They don't respect the horses, and it's just not worth it. So if we're not doing field parties and not getting the revenue from that, what are some of those different experiences that you can put up to have cash flow on the farm so you can do what you want to do? Agritourism. So now that you know what agritourism is and what it could look like, let's talk about some of the benefits and some of the things that you really need to think about if this is something that you want to incorporate on your farm. The first thing is the biggest challenge that I feel like agritourism provides a solution for is utilizing our horses in a way that is not breaking their body down and is not breaking down the farm owner because they're having to ride them all the time. Like with doing these trail rides and doing lessons. When I travel for my leadership development work, we work out of a lot of therapeutic riding facilities because these horses are very used to people who don't know horses or who don't have the mannerisms that conscious horse people try to avoid, right? They just simply aren't around it. And when I'm working with my clients, they're not horse people most of the time, right? So when we get to some of these places though, sometimes we find that the horses are shut down. They're shut down, they're non-responsive, they're non-reactive, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that in just a second. But we can tell that they have been a part of this nonprofit therapeutic lesson hippotherapy machine that doesn't necessarily keep the horse's best interest in mind. It does provide opportunity for kids and adults with differing abilities. However, the horses deal with the consequences of that amount of work, especially when nonprofits need to do X amount of lessons to get the funding to do X amount of things or to support X amount of programming or staff, paying staff, things like that. So that's one of the things that I think about often. And how is it that we can work with horses in a way that doesn't break them down, right? That allows them to live very full lives, even if their lives are being lived in service of people. When I say non-responsive or non-reactive, the work that I do requires for the horse to engage with a person on the ground. It's not in the saddle. But when they're engaging with them, they are responding to someone's energy and how they show up and whether or not they're being true to themselves, whether or not what they're saying matches how they're feeling on the inside. And if you work horses a lot, they will stop responding to your presence on the ground. It's the ones that, always have their heads down. They're just not, they don't have any sort of reaction and they don't enjoy their work. And so I believe that we can be stewards of the horse in a way that preserves their personality and their spirit. That's why I don't use the term like breaking a horse. That's why I think certain training methods are better than others, because I do think that we should be preserving the spirit of the horse instead of simply using them as a tool to get to the means that we want. And so I think agritourism has an opportunity for us to do something different, where the horse can be a horse and they can be out at pasture, and we could be doing mindfulness work and retreats and creating a scenic environment. Y'all know people just like being around horses and being around like in a beautiful environment with pasture, and they enjoy just that setting. Like, it doesn't require every interaction or every time someone sets foot on your horse farm, it doesn't have to be riding. mean, I know it's crazy, right? It's crazy. And I know that a lot of horse farms get their revenue and their clients from training and sales and lessons and private boarding. I ran a boarding facility straight out of college, and the financial viability of boarding horses, even in 2025, is still barely breaking even for a lot of people. When you think about the amount of work it requires and the amount of money that, you know, your market or the people around you can stand to pay to keep their horses there. It's not the most profitable way to do it, especially if you're not offering training and sales at the same time. So when I look at agritourism, I see it as a revenue opportunity. I see it as an opportunity for farms to do something different, do something that allows farm operators to leverage a different skill. Because I know when I was running a boarding facility, I was tired of doing the same thing every day. And because of that, I ended up transitioning to a co-op model, because I also didn't enjoy people who would leave their horses there and show up once a month. Like that was not the kind of environment that I wanted to create on my property. So if I would have known then what I know now, I probably would have done some different agritourism things to help bring in additional revenue to the farm and switch up my farm life. One of the other benefits of agritourism is creating connections to your community. I absolutely believe in teaching people how to interact with your farms or interact with your horses, because they don't know. You know, half the time horse people don't know. But the public does not know what to expect. They don't know that they shouldn't stick their hand out and go like this, because this is what they do with dogs, and the only experience they have with animals is with dogs. Like, they just don't know things. So you have to teach them how to treat you. You have to teach them how to move around your horse farm space. So this is a beautiful opportunity, whether you're doing a tour with a school. This is an amazing opportunity to teach them that, whether it is a tour with a school group and the kids are learning about horses, they're doing a horse craft, or they're making horse treats or something, some sort of activity. They don't have to ride, you know, maybe there is a pony on the farm that is decent enough that they can pet them, like Encore the miniature horse or something like that. But maybe it is just that, right? And you're charging per kid, the teachers are still there, and the kids are only on the farm for an hour. That is one of the ways that you can start teaching people how to interact with the farm. You can have them on property and having no like, maybe that's just the point that I'm trying to get out, right? Every experience doesn't have to be riding a horse. So allowing people to engage with your land in a different way is going to be so critical, and it's going to be of benefit to you and the horse. And I would be remiss if I didn't also bring in this like brand and business development piece, because people will get to know you not for just what you do, but also what it is you offer and the experience that you create on your farm. And so we are starting to see larger examples of that. For example, if you're looking at the Compton Cowboys and seeing how they are creating these relationships with artists and media and brands and clothing companies and all these different things. That is agritourism. That is offering something different. That is building a brand around the experience that is provided on the farm. That is building a business around the image of this hood country cowboy life and capitalizing on the novelty and the interest and the trend that is happening right now. They are talking about the culture, and I think that is so important. I think that agritourism offers us a way to share our culture and share our heritage and share the stories of our people who are doing different things in the agriculture industry, working with horses and carrying that cultural storyline and offering it to the public, offering it to people who are coming onto the farm. And lastly, when you get to create different experiences on the farm, you will start to be known for being able to create space for people that anyone can enjoy themselves on a horse farm. Anyone can. Like, for example, my friend Renata sent me a video about a wine tasting on a horse farm. So she already knew that that was right up my alley anyway. But this person has created this entire business out of these experiences, having a long table in the barn and beautiful charcuterie boards on the table, and the horses are just, got their heads out of the stalls and are munching away, while the ladies and men, whoever, they are having their wine tasting experience in the barn. And that is so neat. And that is so low lift for the horses as well as the people running it. If you don't know how to host a wine tasting, you can hire someone to do that. But you can bring in more money than you shell out for an experience like that. I also think about the fact that this past weekend, my family had our annual family camp out, and we're usually at the state park at Jordan Lake. But because of Hurricane Chantal, the lake flooded, and where we usually stay flooded, and they can't even get to it yet. So this was maybe 10 days before the camp out was supposed to be. And within 3 days, we had moved the location to a Black-owned campground in Henderson, North Carolina called Green's Campground Hideaway. And it was amazing. It was such a good time. Not only were we supporting a Black-owned business, but they and their family. I mean, it was family land, family owned and operated. All the staff on site was a daughter, son, cousin, aunt, whoever. They were all supportive. This property had cabins and domes, or I learned that they're called yurts, that you could camp out there if you didn't have your own camper. They had the camper hookups, and they had dry camping. They had a dog park, which, me and my dogs visited. They had playgrounds for the kids, and they had a trail through the woods that you could ride on your golf carts. They don't really do ATVs like that because, people don't really know how to act on ATVs. But your golf carts, you could take it, or you could walk on the trail with your legs. But it was such an amazing experience, and my family, we have quite a few people who are chronically online, so we're sharing pictures and videos from the place and sharing how amazing of a time that we had. And we left on Sunday. By Monday night, the owners shared that they had 2 to 3 additional bookings for private events on their property. And not to say that we had anything to do with that, but they hadn't done a private event prior to us coming there for our family reunion. So camping is an example of agritourism, allowing people to camp on the farm and or having cabins or the farm stays or the globes, things like that on the farm where people can camp out. You don't even really have to interact with them, or you can incorporate some sort of experience as a part of it. I think that is a super cool thing. One of the other things that I have seen is through Sankofa Farms, which is a farm in Durham. Kamal and his family, they have apiary. They do bees, and they have a farm stay, I think, or some sort of farm experience. It's called Bees in the Trap, which I love that, right? Way to infuse culture into agriculture. They allow people to come and stay on the farm and help them with their bees. Granted, I am not saying that agritourism means people should come in and help you with the horses. I am not that naive. I know that there are very specific things that horses require, and not everybody can do that work. I know the difficulties with the public. I'm not saying that that's what you should do. I'm just saying there's an opportunity to think differently about what you're currently doing. Okay? All right. And on that note, let's talk about some of the things that are required for you to be thinking about if this is something that is interesting to you. Number 1, the legal part of this. You may need to have special permits if you're doing particular events, especially if they're providing alcohol. If you're providing alcohol, you need to have the signage, the liability signage that articulates that this is the kind of farm you are. I know that the North Carolina Horse Council has equine liability signage, but the Agritourism Networking Association also has agritourism liability signage. And so making sure, we talk about this in the Agritourism Network, we call it ANA. We talk about this in ANA a lot of the time, saying if you think that you have enough signs, add at least 5 more, okay? Because people don't read and they need constant reminders. And just like in marketing, people need to see something 7 times before they take an action. Think about that on your farm. There, you need to have a plethora of signage to help guide people through your space. Right behind the legal parts of things is knowing your zoning. I mean, most horse farms are zoned rural anyway, but just making sure that the experiences that you're providing match up with the zoning that your property is in. And that's something that you can check out with your town or city administration. Speaking of liability, the next thing that needs to be kept in mind is insurance. Granted, if you're offering riding lessons, then you probably should, or you probably do, have the insurance necessary to cover liability on the farm, especially with the public. But if you are wanting to incorporate some different experiences, especially if they include food and beverage, you need to discuss that with your insurance provider and understand what additional insurance you might need to cover you for those things. For example, not necessarily a way to get around this, but something that you should keep in mind is that if you're going to have vendors on your property, say you want to do a farm to table and you're hiring a chef, requiring that chef to carry their own insurance. So you're not liable for any issues that come up from the consumption of food and beverage. That is something to think about. That might prevent you from hiring your auntie to make the food. You know, you might go with the chef that has the insurance, just so that you're not liable for anything that happens. I know that I've heard a lot from, Farm Bureau, about the different things that get covered. For example, jump pads and bounce houses. If you're going to incorporate that onto the farm, that is something that is a point of contention for a lot of insurance providers, just because of the injuries that happen there. My best friend runs a bounce house business and she is fully insured. So if you are wanting to offer that, say for a festival or something, maybe it is hiring a vendor that has insurance to provide that so that you don't have to cover that cost. Next thing to keep in mind is the infrastructure. And I know that these are some of the realities, some of the things that you need to be thinking of, but these are also some of the barriers that a lot of Black-owned farms tend to run into, just because they may or may not have the capital to invest in these particular things. So when you're thinking about bringing people on the property, you should be thinking about parking. You should be thinking about bathrooms, and depending on the season, you should be thinking about meeting spaces. How can people get out of the elements if that were to happen? Are you a place that can operate rain or shine? If you have a additional building like a outdoor pavilion or an barn that you can put people in, or I was gonna say a shed, but I'm thinking a larger building, you know, is that something that you can direct people to if there's inclement weather? Is it going to be accessible, handicap accessible? There might be different laws where you live around that. And if that's something that you need to keep in mind, or if that's something that you are wanting to have, creating access for that is something that you need to keep in mind. Any sort of elevation, having a ramp instead of only steps, or saying, hey, our property at this moment is not handicap accessible, and communicating that ahead of time so that you don't create some sort of expectation that just doesn't match up with what's really going on. Lastly, I know that, so one of the reasons, or one of the beliefs that I held a few months ago was that horse people aren't gonna want to do this. They already got too much going on. They already have to manage the farm. They're not going to want to add something else to their plate. And I really sat with that for a long time until I started seeing more and more agritourism operations on these farms with people who don't look like us. Okay? I really, really do believe this is a way to do a different kind of work. And I think this is the opportunity to bring in the next generation into the agricultural landscape in a way that is not out there harvesting things for days and days. Like, that is the kind of work that the next generation is not really interested in. But you talk about creating experiences and like hospitality, like, yes, it is still challenging, but it's a different kind of labor. And that's something that might pique their interest a little bit more. So that's one of the realities with agritourism, is that it is still work. And there is still a potential for burnout if you don't have the support or the staff in place to help you run the thing. But we know that already, right? People say, it's so hard to find good help nowadays. And I think that it's hard to find good help that wants to work as hard as they have to work on a property that is not theirs, for a business that is not theirs, for someone who might not be super nice to them, or is doing the same thing every single time, every day. That's not interesting. And I think that I truly believe that agritourism can help bridge the gap between this current generation of farmer who is holding on to family land, who may have kids who are not interested in doing anything on the farm, and this generation coming up who is divorcing themselves of the workplace drama. They're not trying to necessarily build amazing corporate careers, but I guess the alternative is still their family's property, right? But they're just not trying to be forced into doing it a particular way. I truly believe that this is an opportunity to bridge that gap. I just want this episode to help Black horse farms understand what opportunities are out there. We talk about in ANA the design of these experiences. So if this is something that you are wanting to do, you have to think about how you're designing how people move through the space, right? So, for example, it is not advised to say that you grow blueberries or peaches, or you have something on the farm that is a vegetable that people can pick, strawberries, something like that, right? There's blueberries, there's something people can pick. It is not advised to do like this you pick vegetable or fruit situation and also have a petting zoo, because the way that the biosecurity measures are really going to have to be enforced, making sure people wash their hands, they're not going from the petting zoo and putting stuff in their mouth. That is an example of something that might not work altogether, an experience like completely together. However, if you were saying, I have you can do a you pick situation over here, that's one experience, and then you can do the petting zoo, that's a different experience. If you separate the two, that makes more sense, and can protect you a little bit better. But we think about like the example I gave with the horse farm and the charcuterie. If it is a smaller event, a smaller amount of people, you have a little bit more opportunity to reinforce these cleanliness standards so that people know that they need to use hand sanitizer, they need to wash their hands, they don't need to go from the charcuterie board to the stall and back. Like, that's gross. Okay. Next, managing the flow of people. That's one of the things that a lot of trail ride groups have had a challenge with, having to increase security, having to keep people contained and not piss off their neighbors. Managing the flow of people and making sure that everyone is safe. The decision you get to make is how big of an event will we have, A lot of agritourism farms, especially if they provide specific experiences, like a U-Pick operation, or maybe it is a day in the life of a farmer, something like that. They manage their flow of people through ticketing and ticketing systems that allow you to buy tickets for certain times during the day. So you can buy a ticket from 8 to 10, or you can buy a ticket for the session from 8 to 10, 10 to 12, 12 to 2, and that helps you manage your flow so you don't get overwhelmed. You know that you can staff appropriately, and you can keep everybody safe. You're not just getting inundated with a bunch of people only from 12 to 4, and everybody's just milling about outside those times and completely overwhelmed during those times. And lastly, you want to make sure you have that community and staff support, right? Finding the people, whether it is your family, maybe you have been having a hard time getting good staff on the farm. Maybe it's because they don't know horses. Or there's people who don't know horses that want to help, but you don't have any way for them to help because the only experience is that you're offering a horseback riding. This is an opportunity for those people to say, you know what, you don't know horses, but you know hospitality. You don't know horses, but you know community service. I mean, customer service, not community service. Community service is also good, but you don't know horses, but you know customer service. You don't know horses, but you know how to fix things. Bringing in different people that can support you in different ways, you can capitalize off that if you have different experiences on the farm. If it's not just, I need you to lead this trail ride, or I need a horse trainer to be on the farm to provide lessons, or having educators on the farm because you're doing school groups, and not just lessons. So, like I said before, this is not just about giving people an opportunity to ride. It's about curating an experience that allows you to build a business that is sustainable, that offers some variety, that you can connect with the next generation. If you are the next generation and you're wanting to get into horses and having a farm and, doing some cool stuff, this is just some opportunities that you can think about to do something differently. It doesn't just have to be boarding, training, sales. This is just another way to bring in some cash on the farm. Now, I would love to see more Black-owned businesses and farms benefit from agritourism. And one of the things that really excited me about being on the board of the Agritourism Networking Association is that it was our kind of imperative to support businesses in the western part of North Carolina, especially after Hurricane Helene. And so our summer farm tour that's coming up, August 17th, 18th maybe. The summer farm tour is going to be at Tryon. When they told me, I said, wait a damn minute. Y'all knew this was going to be at Tryon and you were just now telling me this? That's crazy. Okay. So that summer farm tour that I went on 1 year ago is happening at Tryon. We're touring some farms in the area, and they're not horse farms, or not all of them. I don't know that there are any horse farms. There's a couple wineries because, that's the wine part of the state. But we're meeting at Tryon and touring some farms around that area. But also, the conference that we have in the winter, in February, it'll also be at Tryon. And I am really pushing as best I can for some content or a session on agritourism in the horse world, because we're going to be at Tryon, right? Despite it being a super duper funded endeavor, it is tourism. It is horses. Horses are agriculture. It is agritourism. And I would love for someone from the leadership of Tryon to be able to come and speak about the opportunities that they see and how they continue to capitalize. Because, child, yeah, if you haven't been, you must go. I'm not saying you have to come to the conference, but I am saying that, oh, that's another opportunity on the farm, offering event space to do different events. They don't even have to interact with the animals or the vegetables and fruits and the products on the farm. If you have a building, you can offer event space. I just saw where the Ebony Horsewomen opened up an event space on their farm. They are a great example of different ways to leverage their property to bring in revenue. Not only do they have their cadets and their lessons and their retreats and their training programs, they now have an event space. And that is exactly what I'm talking about. And so I think that we have to, if you needed permission to think differently about how to be in and around horses and horse business, horse industry, agritourism is it. Here's the permission that you need. So after 2020, I have seen nonprofit after nonprofit open up, wanting to connect brown and black kids with horses. And I have also seen them struggle with funding, with delivering their programs, with actually articulating what it is that they do, with putting together the funding support, like actual funders and funder relations. I've seen all of those things happen. And I'm going to do an episode on like nonprofits, and I'm going to bring someone in who has experience in that space. But I just can't help but think that this is one of the opportunities that Black in the Saddle can offer just through content, is saying, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about changing what you offer to reduce the workload on the horses, reducing the workload on the person? I'm not saying that you're not going to work hard. It's just going to be a different kind of work. I really think that this is a untapped opportunity. And as people are coming back to the land, we have to create spaces for them to connect with horses and connect with our culture and our land in different ways. It does not have to be the same traditional way that the horse industry told you that you have to operate your farm. It's not sustainable. The industry is decreasing because of it. People are selling off huge herds because the sales market and the training markets are not as popular as they used to be. People are getting out of competing and going for a more leisurely life because of the expense. Just think about that. Just think about that. I would love to get to a space where there are Black horse farms that are doing events and curating experiences for people to learn about horses, to learn about Black cowboys and cowgirls, and to connect with them like as a community through either service or funding, and really supporting the next generation of horse folk, because we know that their interests are just a little bit different. You know, when I first relaunched this season, I put out a survey saying, what are some of the things that you are interested in hearing about, or who are some of the people you're interested in hearing from? And I got quite a few responses. But I also realized that, you know, this podcast started because there were some things that I not necessarily needed to get off my chest, but I can't think of another term for it right now. But there's some information that I wanted to get out to my people in the horse world. And a lot of it back then was like from the animal health side. But as I've learned more about the horse industry as a business and the opportunities that can come up for people and how we can work with our horses differently, I have got to share that with y'all. Okay, I've got to share that with y'all. So thank you for tuning in to another episode of Black in the Saddle, and I will see you next week. Be sure to subscribe where you're supposed to subscribe. Where's that? YouTube. Follow where you should follow. Social media, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and engage with us. Engage with us. The us that I'm referring to is me. Let me know what you enjoyed about this episode and leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And that helps me get this podcast out to even more folks. So I appreciate you listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye.